need to get away from me.
So who came up with the initial concept of the Theatre Bazaar?
I came up with the initial concept based on the movie Aria that I said I was editing a featurette for. It's an art house movie with Jean-Luc Godard, Robert Altman, Ken Russell, and it's a very nice movie. But again, they had that same situation where they had creative freedom. Just do a film set to an aria. Other than that, you're on your own. And the filmmakers just loved that idea because they were working with, their colleagues and people that they admired. And of course, they were kind of at the top of their game because they didn't want to look crap next to all their, contemporaries. So it really makes for a very creatively satisfying environment.
As the writer and director of one of the pieces as well, can you tell us more about the story that you brought to the table?
Yeah, my story is about a relationship that's on the rocks, and it's a relationship that's based on addiction to food. And it starts out all nice with strawberries and cream and just gets grimmer and grimmer and grimmer until ultimately when one of them has the upper hand in the breakup situation, she takes that addiction to an extreme.
And what was the the seed that was planted that you came up with this idea?
I just wanted to do something that was both beautiful and disgusting at the same time. I always like films that can kind of touch on both of those emotions, where you're like, oh, that's really pretty, but what's happening is really kind of disgusting and disturbing. So I was really trying to kind of get both of those things, that you could actually take a frame of it and think, oh, that's really nice, but then what's happening is probably about as grim as you could imagine.
We go our separate ways before we hurt each other more than we already have.
Do you think you can hurt me more than you already have?
Like my story in particular, there's nothing more interesting than two people in a room that have an intensity. There's a situation, there's two people breaking up. It's a marriage that's destroying itself. And two people in the room and all that tension and all that depravity that takes place, that to me is much more interesting than watching a special effects sequence.
And where did you get your ideas from? Were you given any kind of structure that you had to adhere to when you were making this film?
The only structure I got from this film was it had to be between 12 and 20 minutes. So for me, that was fantastic. I mean, that was the only thing. I knew I had a time structure. So the idea came, I wanted to do something that was going to be really dramatic and also really shocking. And I had access, I live in Germany, I live in Berlin, so I had access to some of the best German actors you could get. And so I just wrote a story that would, utilize two actors that I really wanted to work with. And I just let my imagination take it to the worst place it could possibly go.
I feel everything they did.
What was the inspiration behind your particular story, and what was the essence of it for you?
My episode is called Vision Stains, which is basically about a female kind of pseudo-serial killer, but basically she's a writer going into an area with a lot of homeless women and basically believing that when people experience extreme images or extreme things with their eyes, the visual memory of that gets trapped in the liquid of their eyeballs. So much like a junkie, she goes out with a syringe, injects it in their eyes, pulls out the liquid within and injects it into her own eyes, much like a drug of dreams, to see what they've seen, and then she writes down their stories. So she doesn't murder out of hatred or contempt, she murders out of love because they're suicidal women who are trying to kill themselves, to actually give them a voice in a very, very weird sort of surrealistic manner to kill them. So it's sort of a metaphor on obsessions with other people's lives, but not only that, obsessions with being able to dream only through drugs, So it's a drug movie, only an eyeball drug movie. So the inspirations come from, I'm really obsessed with women and eyeballs. What am I going to do? What kind of movie are you going to make? So, it sort of came from that. And I'm also very fascinated with the concept that the biological reactions to visual things that we experience in life. For example, in the Jack the Ripper murders back in the day, back in our hometown over here, back in the UK, represent. Back in that time, when one of the prostitutes was murdered, they actually photographed her eye to try to see the very last thing she'd experienced. So that's sort of a beginning of that concept, but I sort of took it one step further. And, when I was younger, I grew up, in a time where there was a lot of junkies around me, so I was certainly inspired by a lot of those. The early 90s were an interesting time.
And it's important to say as well that you actually wrote your particular story as well within the screenplay.
Yeah. No, I wrote it. So if you hate it, you can blame me. Sometimes I write movies too, and I also work as a cinematographer on other people's films, which is one of my favorite things to do in the world.
It gives you that extra vision. I mean, because from what I've seen of the film, your particular scenes really do make your
Eyes
cringe.
Well, to go to that level of graphic horror for me, just simply to splatter blood on a wall or to do an extremely gory scene is completely uninteresting. So there had to be an idea behind it and a concept behind all the blood. If not, there's no point, in my opinion. So even though, yes, they're extremely graphic images that might please horror fans, it's got a different sort of context that, I guess some horror fans will either take or leave, because it does try to go on a sort of, let's say, metaphorical, I say that in quotes without sounding like an idiot, I hope, level where we try to put a little bit of soul, so to speak, in quotes, in it, while still delivering kind of a kick-ass visceral horror film. So, hopefully they'll like it over here. It was certainly done with that in mind, to not just do graphic images for no reason that I'm not interested in.